Hello, I am Jerry Page. I am with Pastor Thomas Robb in Zinc, Arkansas. Today is January 10th. Thank you again, Thomas Robb, to let me interview you and talk a little bit about your life.
Okay.
Go ahead and start with when and where you were born and go from there.
Okay, I was born in Detroit, Michigan. And when Detroit was a nice city. I moved away when I was 16. But Detroit was a nice city, not like you see or think about it today. Just like one time Kansas City was a nice city, and St. Louis and Philadelphia and Chattanooga and Memphis and a lot of other major cities that have been destroyed were all at one time, the center of art and music and theater and so on, but not anymore. But I was born in Detroit in 1946, and I was born in a home, in a family. A lot of times you see, I hear people on TV talking about white nationalism, because in some ways, I'm national director of the Klan, but I feel in many ways I represent what I call the white Christian nationalist movement as a spokesman for them. Not just white national, but and not just Christian nationalism, but white Christian nationalism, because they kind of ride the same horse. And so I was born in 1946. My mom and dad were very involved in politics. Not that they ran for office or things like that, but they were very interested in politics. And in fact, when my mother was 14 years old in 1933, and 14 years old, she attended a debate between Clarence Darrow. Do you know who Clarence Darrow is? So there we go. I will tell you in a minute. Clarence Darrow and William Jennings Bryan. And you're familiar with the name William Jennings Bryan, I'm sure. Clarence Darrow was a lawyer for John Scopes, who was in the monkey trials in 1925 in Tennessee, where John Scopes was a school teacher, and he started teaching evolution, and he got arrested and went to trial. And William Jennings Bryan came down there to represent the state of Tennessee against this infraction upon Tennessee law. You're teaching evolution to our children. And then Clarence Darrow represented John Scopes, saying, hey, freedom of speech, or whatever his arguments he used. And so after that, he was a well-known attorney already, Clarence Darrow. He's an atheist, he wasn't a Christian, and that's why he represented John Scopes. And so he became more of a household word, not appearing on TV, because they had TV back then. But in 1933, Clarence Darrow debated Dr. Arthur Gouthey at the U.S. Naval Armory in Detroit, Michigan. And Clarence Darrow, a lot of people want to debate Clarence Darrow. Now, this is before I was born, so I'm only going by what I heard from my mom. Okay, a lot of people want to debate Clarence Darrow because of his notoriety, John Scopes, but he wouldn't debate him because none of them know enough about evolution or any of that. They don't know enough about history, any of that stuff. They don't know enough to have a legitimate, accurate debate. He said the only one I'd be willing to debate would be Dr. Gouthey. Well, Dr. Gouthey took him up on the challenge, and Dr. Gouthey debated him at the U.S. Naval Academy, U.S. Naval Armory in Detroit, Michigan. The building is still there. Last time I was in Detroit, I went by, took pictures of it. Still there. She was 14 years old, and she went there and she took notes. They all got lost in a flood when I was a child. They don't have any baby pictures of me because in Detroit they had a basement, and the flood came, and all the pictures all her keepsakes were destroyed. So they have no baby pictures of me. I wonder about that. No, there is a couple, actually. There's a couple who survived. And so she attended that debate. So she was very in tune with going on with politics as a young girl. And it was about the same age she gave her life to Christ. She went to a revival of some sort, I guess, and they sang that song, what is it? We sing it at church sometimes, Chester, and I make comment about it. Okay, I'm hesitant. I'm determined to remember the name of the song. And I can't, so it'll come to me. So anyway, it doesn't matter. And so that's kind of environment. And her family attended a church called Detroit Metropolitan Bible Tabernacle. And it was pastored by the fellow named E.J. Rollins. He's pastored Detroit Metropolitan Tabernacle. And the Metropolitan Tabernacle, E.J. Rollins, was named by a fellow named Claude. In fact, I've got that right here, I think. I brought some stuff along to show you as of visual interest. Claude Williams was a communist, and he published this little pamphlet called Hellraisers of Detroit. These are the extremists in Detroit. These are the ones you got to watch out for. They're the bad guys. And E.J. Rollins listed there. He had quite a large church in Detroit. And then, of course, this is a copy of the debate between the battle of the century between Clarence Darrow and Dr. Galthy. And so I got a copy of this a while back. So anyway, so that was the mindset, of my parents, and even my grandmother. Even my grandmother was very much involved, and so I'm kind of like a third generation of white Christian nationalist. And so I remember in the early 50s, like 1950, watching the Joseph McCarthy. You know who Joseph McCarthy was. McCarthyism and all that sort of stuff. Well, he was on Face of the Nation. They had what they call the Army McCarthy telecast, or debates or something, or hearings it was. And in November, it's interesting because in November, I got to write down here because I wanted to make sure I got this right. So I wrote down the date. In November 7, 1954, Joseph McCarthy was on Face of the Nation, and he said, this is going back almost 75 years ago, he said, the Democratic Party has become the party of communism. Now, 75 years ago, now it's pretty much self-evident. You watch what the Democratic Party, what they're doing now, but he's going back 75 years and said they become the party of communism. McCarthy was going after the deep state, same as Donald Trump is doing. I don't know how you feel about Donald Trump, but he was going after the deep state, but he didn't have the advantage of having the internet, YouTubers, all that sort of stuff. He just had ABC, CBS, NBC, three major networks that control all the media in this country. And then you had, of course, the newspapers, the New York Times and so on, old My Samuel Newhouse and others. So they were, the media was very much controlled. So anything you wanted to hear about them, Mark Twain said years ago, he said, he who does not read the newspaper is misinformed. He who does read the newspaper, he who does not read the newspaper is uninformed. And he who does read the newspaper is misinformed. So I thought that kind of interesting, but a lot of truth to that. So that's kind of the environment I was raised in. My parents were in the past, I sometimes sort of very strict, but I never liked saying that word because they weren't strict, like with a whip or thing like that. And then I thought, well, maybe discipline, no. But I thought, well, that's not a good way to frame it either, because they weren't disciplinarians, like, again, looking for an opportunity to lash me with a whip or yell at me or scream at me. But what they were is good role models. They were good role models for me, and their life lived out their Christian commitment. And so it wasn't like they were disciplinarian or they were anything like that, but they just were good role models for my life and my brothers. And I recall one time my dad sold insurance, and at Christmas Eve, all these agents there got a bottle of wine or a bottle of whiskey, I don't know, something, alcohol. And he came home and didn't know what it was, so he got home, opened it up, and he walked over to the kitchen sink and opened up, poured it down the drain. And the next day, people at work said, "What do you think that was expensive champagne it was. That was expensive champagne that the boss got us, wasn't it?" And my dad said, "I have no idea. I poured it down the drain." And then, "What? You poured that? That's $50 champagne. You did what with it?" So that was just, he didn't make a big deal about it. It's just him. And then I found something else I found out, even after about the time I got married. I didn't know this, but when I was a youngster, 4, 5, 6 years old, they started a little restaurant, a little business, but they failed. They went into huge debt, and it was years later I found this out But people were telling them, you ought to file bankruptcy. You ought to file bankruptcy. And my folks said, well, we're not going to file bankruptcy. We owe these people their money. We're not going to file bankruptcy. We owe it to them. So they got a loan from a bank, paid off their debtors, and then they paid off the bank. So that's the kind of atmosphere and the kind of what I saw. So they weren't disciplinarians. They weren't strict. They lived out a Christian role model. And that was my life growing up. And so I could have respect for their opinions and thoughts and things they said. I could have respect for those things because I saw a family that was not being agitated, not running off, going crazy got irritated over little things. They just lived a good Christian life, and they loved America. And they thought Joseph MacArthur was a wonderful man. In fact, years later, I became friends with one of Joseph McCarthy's assistants, Larry Litt. And she wrote an autobiography about her book, and she mentions me in her book. And so, that's kind of cool that here this man I'm watching on TV when I'm 10, 12 years old, years later became friends. Of course, she was very old, and it was many years ago. But anyway, so that was kind of cool. And so when I was in high school, I was going to become an attorney in my mind. I thought I'm going to become an attorney, and as an attorney, I can get into politics and save America. How young people get excited, but they're going to do stuff. And so I intended to go and become an attorney. But one day we saw in the newspaper. I guess probably maybe my junior year of high school, maybe early senior year. I'm not sure. And I joined the John Birch Society. Are you familiar with the John Birch Society? Well, John Birch Society was a group started by a fellow named Robert Welsh. He actually was a very wealthy candy manufacturer, Welsh Candy Company. I mean, I think they made Tootsie Rolls and stuff. Very wealthy man. And he was concerned about the communist influence in the country, as McCarthy was. And he started a group called the John Birch Society. It became very, very powerful. They actually basically dominated or controlled the 1964 Republican Convention in San Francisco, California. And so they became very, very large. And they're still in existence, but they're depleted in their influence over the years. And so when I was a junior in high school, I joined the John Birch Society. And then about the same time, my mom and dad used to get in the mail a publication called The Pilgrim Torch, published by Dr. Kenneth Goff. And Dr. Kenneth Goff was from Minnesota, and he was in the younger years, he had joined the Communist Party. The Communist Party started in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I don't know if you're aware of that. People think maybe New York or New Jersey. It started, and I could be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. It actually started in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So Jeff Fry, their mayor of Minneapolis, he's in good territory, I guess, for him, politics. But Kenneth Goff joined the Communist Party, and but he was raised in the church, and he, as I understand, because I knew him, as I understand, he one day just doing a mundane task of washing dishes in the kitchen sink, without even realizing, just scrubbing dishes. Women like to do that kind of stuff, scrubbing dishes. And he caught himself singing some of the songs of the church. Rock of Ages, cleft for me. And he caught himself singing those songs without even realizing. And that's why I always impress on people. In fact, I wrote an article in the current issue of our magazine, Torch, which I wish I would have brought someone, but I don't. Anyway, about put a song in your child's heart. Because those songs will have more impact on a child as they get older than lectures or sermons. You put a song with a melody into a child's heart, and that's going to stay with them forever. And he caught himself singing those songs, and from there he repented, turned back to the church. His communist buddies tried to kill him, threw him under the subway. He lost a leg. He testified before the Martin Dies Committee, which later became known as the House Committee on Un-American Activities, and began speaking around the country about communism and the dangers of communism. And I attended a lecture of his at the Central Assembly of God in Tucson, Arizona in 1964, I believe it was. And he had a school in Colorado. And I decided to go to that school. And it was a small school. It wasn't like a huge, well, like Liberty University, you know. There's, I think, about 8 students. And there's a young gal named Muriel McAllister went to that school also. And she became my wife. And she's sitting right over there at the house. And so we met at that school. And my daughter told me, you should have had Mom over here too, because you probably would have interested in her input. That's why I guess I didn't think about that, because she would have had a very interesting input also. But anyway, she just got over some health issues. Had a pinched nerve, and then got some type of one of these flus that are going around. So she's recovering pretty good now. But she hadn't been in church a month, you know? Yeah. So anyway, another story. So she was there at that school, and so that's where we met. And so I attended that school, and I entered the ministry from that standpoint. I attended there, got a bachelor's degree in theology, and came back home to Tucson, Arizona, and began my political career. I started publishing a magazine called The Message of Old Monthly. I organized a couple of demonstrations. I organized a demonstration in front of the UN on the 25th anniversary of the United Nations, I believe it was, 48, 58, 68, yeah, about right, about 1972 or 71, because it started in 48, I think, the UN. And that's why I think it's the 25th anniversary. So I built a casket, like a little wood casket, and some about 63 million Christians killed by the peaceful troops of the UN or something like that. And we went to the UN headquarters in downtown Tucson, and my daughter, the one that I was telling you about a minute ago, just got her doctorate degree. She carried her on her back, and or maybe this way, I don't know. And her and I had that deal there, and held some signs and demonstration against the United Nations and their infiltration. You know, their move right now, you hear talk about getting us out of the United Nations. Well, John Birch Society started that way back in, well, they started in 1958, the John Birch Society, and one of their main goals was to get the U.S. out of the UN. You know, taking 75 years, but now they actually talk about it. So we had that demonstration. The cop came by and says, can you move here? He said, the people inside think there might be a bomb in there. They're afraid, you know, whatever. And I can understand why they're afraid, because the Bible says the wicked flee when no man pursueth. You know, they're afraid of everything. But the righteous are bold as a lion. And so I said, well, I don't think I've breaking any laws by being here. It's a public sidewalk, so I think I prefer to stay. And he lifted up the thing, see if anything rattled inside or hissing or ticking or anything like that. And he said, okay, you know, so he didn't give me any trouble, and that was the end of that. And so, you know, that was my political career, not with the Klan, but my political career. I published a Message of Old Monthly, and then in 1972, wrote about a year after that, maybe 2 years, okay, we decided to move to Arkansas. And there's pictures of, in that book, let me show you right here, that number 1, the volume number 1. Well, and these people I'm talking about here, like here, that's my mom and dad right there. And that's the house I was born in. And that's my membership card to the John Birch Society. Okay, but I'm getting to here. Oh, there's a picture of Kenneth Goff. I got a scholarship to that anti-communist school. I must have done something right, or my dad paid somebody for it. I don't know. Anyway, and but that's us packed up coming to Arkansas. We didn't know where we were going. We just loaded up everything in the back of this old truck, and we had a little baby, about 3 months old, something like that, who lives in Branson now. You ever been to Dixie Outfitters in Branson? He owns that. And so we loaded up everything, and we're just coming to Arkansas. We didn't know where we were going. Didn't have a job. Didn't have credit cards back then or debit cards, so I stuffed some money, cash in my pocket, you know, and checked out where the convenience stores were at. No, I'm just joking. Anyway, so we came to Arkansas, and I did have a name of a person who whose mother and dad lived here, or no, aunt and uncle lived here, and they were white nationalists. They weren't white nationalists, the ones they used back then, but that's what they were. And so that kind of gave me a stopping point. But I don't think they wanted me to live with them. So we saw them, but then we eventually for a short time we moved up to Shell City, Missouri, to a church called today it's called the Church of Israel, with Pastor Dan Gaiman. Back then it was called the Church of Christ of Haley's Bluff. And so we moved out a short time, and then we moved down here to Arkansas. And that truck that I showed you, it broke down along the way in Tucumcari, New Mexico. It broke down. And so we had I had a car, and so we drove the car the rest of the way. Then I came back and picked it up. You ever hear of Shepherd's Chapel? Okay, well, big TV network on the internet, not on the internet, on TV. He got his own channel on Dish TV, and Arlen Murray, and he's passed away a few years ago. But I knew him, and he helped me go back to Tucumcari, New Mexico, and pick my truck after it got repaired. And so we eventually lived in a house there in Bass, Arkansas, the other side of Mount Judy. But my mom and dad used to get it in a publication in the mail called this right here. I've got a copy. This publication, Common Sense, and it was published out of Union, New Jersey. And so these get that in the mail. So they got different publications in the mail that were exposing communism and the influence they're having into the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, and attempts to undermine the Christian foundation of this nation. And and this one from this is 1959, so I was 13 years old. And so I probably read this when I was 13 years old, because it come to our home, because that's when I read in one of the publications they had on the fallacies of the Holocaust. They always hear about all these Jews got exterminated in concentration camps, and so, which was just totally bogus, but it makes good war propaganda. And so it was in one of those publications where I first read about the Holocaust being a myth. And it turned out I became friends with one of the writers of that magazine years later, named Eustace Mullins. Years later, so that's kind of interesting too. So, but we used to get that into our home, Common Sense. And so from there, I was published in my paper, the Messageable Monthly, and then then I changed the name to The Torch, which was a newspaper format, and today it's more of a magazine format. In fact, right here, this is the format of it today, but back then it was a newspaper format. And so I started putting the paper The Torch, and right around that same time, I got a phone call from a friend of mine, and he says, Bernard Brith is holding a big meeting down here in Hot Springs. It's a Jewish organization, Sons of the Covenant. And so they having a big meeting down here. He said, I think it'd be nice if you all come down and do a protest against it. I thought, that sounds like a good idea. So I drove down there and with two other people, a young fellow and his wife. And that Saturday morning, I think it was Saturday morning, I don't know what morning it was actually, but one morning, okay. And we pull up our signs and start marching from the synagogue. Bible said that the Jews are the synagogue of Satan, the fake Jews, not the real Jews. And I got arrested, and they got arrested too, my friend and his wife. So three of us got arrested, and I spent a couple 3 days in jail, and then I was able to get a fellow by the name of John Warnock to represent me. And actually I contacted a fellow by the name of J.B. Stoner. J.B. Stoner was working for the National States Rights Party in might have been Atlanta, but somewhere in Georgia. And he he had run for governor after that time. He ran for well, no, about that same time, I guess. He ran for governor, lieutenant governor, got a lot of support, but he was a racist, so he didn't get elected. So he contacted John Norman Warnock, who represented us in court. And I was found guilty. And my wife said, I knew it was going to go down when the judge said, what is the maximum I can give them? She said, that doesn't sound good to me. What's the maximum I can give them? And we really didn't do anything wrong, but the maximum was a year in jail and $5,000 fine and stuff like that. So,
Tom, do you remember what the charges were?
Probably disorderly conduct. Yeah, it was, and so that's what we were charged: a year in jail and $500. But we appealed, and they never brought it back up for appeal because they knew they probably couldn't win. So it never came back for appeal. So it just became nothing, a mute. And so from there I was getting publications, different ones, and reading, and very concerned about what's happening to the country, and I wasn't satisfied just being concerned. I wanted to do something, and see what year we're about 1972 or 73 there now, and so 75. I attended a meeting down in New Orleans by David Duke. And a friend of mine, Ralph Forbes, and I went down there. Ralph Forbes was associated with George Lincoln and Rockwell. Are you familiar with George Lincoln and Rockwell?
Rockwell sounds familiar.
Pardon?
Rockwell sounds a little bit familiar.
Yeah, he started with the American Nazi Party in Arlington, Virginia. And he had worked with Rockwell out in California. He was a California coordinator for them. And he and I went down and attended me with David Duke. So then I've been friends with David Duke ever since. You know who David Duke is? Okay. And I talked to Bryce Crawford was here a few weeks ago. I asked him if he heard David Duke. He said no. And I thought, no wonder you're so mixed up. You don't know your history. So anyway, I became friends with David Duke at that time. And and then David Duke spoke up here in Rogers, Arkansas. About the same time, I introduced him from the speaker stand to speaker. And let me see. Probably a lot of other stuff happened in between to that point, but I don't know what. Anyway, had a baby, Jason. His father was born, and Jason, who's an attorney in town now. And but in 1977, I joined this. I think it's 70, maybe it was 79. I joined the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, and the reason I joined is because I saw a lot of other groups out there, a lot of groups who were concerned about the same thing, but they were able to be ignored. If you could ignore them, and maybe they'll go away type thing. And so they couldn't ignore the Klan. So I thought, well, that's the biggest bang for the buck. Joining the Klan, the biggest bang for the buck. And so there's a lot of baggage with it. I'm aware of the baggage. I'm not naive. I know there's a lot of baggage with it, but it's still the biggest bang for the buck. Because if I had joined the Committee to Save Western Civilization, people would still yawn and that'd be none of it, But they can't ignore the Klan. And so I joined the Klan in 1979, and then became national director sometime after that. I became state director, and then David Duke resigned in 71, I think, 81. Got elected as state representative in Louisiana. And then I became national director of the Klan. So after that, there was whole rallies around the country. I became friends with Richard Butler and Aryan Nation, spoke at their meetings numerous times, and so we held massive amount of rallies, as you can see from the books, everywhere. We're holding rallies. Got a lot of support, a lot of hate, both. The same element, the hate is there, the same element that hates white Christians today, same element. And because they project this image of the Klansmen being, like you said, don't go down there, they might kill you, or whatever your friends told you. We had one fellow come to our meeting here, this was 10 years ago, and the same thing. He said, I told some of my friends I was going out to a Klan deal over there in Harrison. He told me don't come because he said I'll get killed. He said they have shootouts with the police every morning. Every morning we get to have a shootout with the police down here in Chester. Yeah, but that's what he was told, and people believe that crazy stuff. It's amazing, That's why Satan called the father of lies, because he that's his handiwork, and so anybody who stands up against a satanic rebellion is going to be lied about. And so we held rallies across the country. I've been assaulted several times, had a rock smashed to my head, a couple occasions we held a 1981, before I became national director, Don Black had organized a demonstration in Washington, D.C. Don Black has later started Stormfront Radio. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not. And but then some legal issues, he couldn't go, so I went in his place and conducted the deal, press conference and so forth. And they're busting in, flying in, however, protesters. I think it's like some 80,000 protesters there. They're bringing from Detroit, Philadelphia, New York. They're bringing from all over. The federal government's so concerned about the number of protesters coming in to protest our Klan event that President Reagan was flown out of the Capitol over the weekend, and because they're afraid that the rioters are going to storm the White House, and so they flew him out of the Capitol. And there was riots. That's about 2 or 3 days. It was horrible. We weren't. We escaped because I guess God's hand was on us. But I held a one-man march right down through Constitutional Avenue, and then spoke at Lafayette Park, which was right across the White House. I think probably the reason we survived is because we stayed on schedule. We stayed on schedule. We started when you said we were going to start, and we said we were going to end. And I think the protesters were probably so drunk by that time, they were high on drugs or whatever. By the time they got sober, we were already out of town. So they turned on the city, and they caused all kind of devastation, destruction in the city. It lasted a couple of days, but Reagan was safe. They flew him probably to a beach somewhere or something like that, and so. We just held those rallies, but in the late 1990s, I thought to myself, that we hold a rally and then the rally's over and everybody's excited about it, and you come back home. And our rallies were very expensive to hold a rally because, we did it right. I've seen other Klan groups hold rallies over the years and they don't know what they're doing. And so I always, we, as far as I'm concerned, did it right. We always had our rallies at courthouse steps, and we got very good. In fact, I had several times actually this happened. I'll go say, I want a permit to hold a rally for the Klan, and they said, well, the person who issues the permit is not here. And I said, okay. So I reached into the wastebasket, pulled out a sheet of paper. I said, I'll write out my own permit. That's a date, time, all that sort of stuff. Here it is. Here's your permit. And so I got very good at that. And so we would hold rallies and so forth, and sometimes, most time they were okay, but sometimes they get a little scary, I guess. Maybe not so much scary for me because they always brought a lot of police out, because the police were afraid of all these crazy people, rioters, throwing stuff and rocks, and the one rally they were throwing money at us, quarters. They couldn't throw paper dollars; they wouldn't fly very far. But the police would take away batteries and things like that because they knew, but they couldn't take away people's change. They couldn't rob them. So that's one rally. They came with money and they were throwing quarters and stuff. I guess they figured that. I guess they didn't want to throw silver dollars. They probably have silver dollars, obviously, but they were throwing quarters anyway. And I guess maybe they thought we were going to break our rally and start picking up money off the steps of the courthouse, but that didn't happen, and because they didn't like. And I had one sheriff of one town, because whenever we held our rallies, we always tried to maintain discipline and be very stoic. And so people, and I always coordinated it, and so in such a way for us, we would have music playing, and then I would have maybe like, and I always try to use a rally team, people that we're familiar with. I see different groups over the years say, we have a rally, everybody come on down. You know, like that deal in Charlottesville in 2017, you know, I was invited by somebody. I said, I'm not going to go there. I said, there are people that organize don't know what they're doing, and I'm not going to go there. I said, the only way I'm going to go to a rally if I organize it, because I knew what I was doing. Because you don't need everybody to have a rally. You just need some coordinated people who you know are good people, aren't going to do something stupid. And so they're inviting everybody down there. They got some good people, they got crazy people. What I don't know, I didn't go. And but we always had people we knew we could trust who would follow orders, I guess. I hate to use that phrase orders, because I don't give orders, but you know, follow a procedure. And so we'd have a rally on a Courthouse step, and then we'd start some music playing, you know, and we'll have maybe 2 people come out with a flag, you know, and then 5 minutes later, 2 more people come out. Then a few more minutes, then 2 more people. And so for a period of about 35, 40 minutes, we just built up the number of people on the steps with the flags, with good music, not Johnny Rebel music, you probably heard what I'm referring to. But good music, inspirational music, you know, epic music, I guess you could say. And so we would do that. One rally we held in, I don't know where it was at. We didn't have any speakers. We just had the rally team come out and just stand there, play music, and just stand. All we do is stood on the steps instead of, because usually you have some speakers, you know. I thought, well, let's do something different. So we'd have people come out and they stand on the steps with the flags and the music, and never said a word, just the music playing and the guys with the flags, and the crowd were crazy. They wanted some confrontation, and so we did that. We did different stuff, you know, but after a while, you know, it don't really materialize, because in any, I'm going to sound like a businessman now. In any type of business, okay, if you're not getting some results from it, then what's the point of doing that, okay? And we had a lot of support, but an organization needs something besides a pat on the back. It needs cash. It needs money. You can't operate, you know, no matter how much. I can have 1,000 people say, I love what you're doing, and I'd say, well, okay, here, I want to take it off for you. So, oh, I can't today, you know, type thing, you know. So you got to have money, you got to have cash, and so people got to feel that you're a responsible person, that they can put money in your hands, and that you're going to treat it responsibly. And we had most white nationalist groups really struggle for money. Really struggle for it, because people are stingy, I guess. It's our human nature, you know. But they got bills to pay, so I understand that. And so, and then they get whine about it. Well, we need more. And I never would do that. You know, I could be broke as church mouse, but I never let anybody know we were broke. Because people who are business people aren't going to support somebody. They don't think they know how to handle money. But if they think you know how to handle money, then they will support you. Made sense to me. I figured it out. So I never whined about not having money. I might have gone to a rally and trying to hope I had enough pennies in my pocket for gas to get back home. But I would never let anybody know that. And so the year around 2000 or thereabout, you know, I talked to his father and my daughter and some other people that we're close to. And I said, we're holding these rallies, but we're not getting what we really need out of them, you know. And I said, what we really need is to have a home base. We need something structured on the ground. And so that's when we redirected our attention away from holding rallies, especially when the internet was coming on now. Well, why do you need to spend $1,000 to hold a rally when you put a program on the internet? So the internet would change, you know, everything back then, you know. You were probably raised in the internet, but you know, when I was young, we didn't know what the internet was. We were trying to figure out what this thing was, and so the internet was just coming on. We were the first group that actually had an internet site, KKK.com. So you know how, and so I said we need to direct ourselves to building a a structure, a permanent location, say, this is where we are, instead of just a mailbox and go to hold a rally. Because we had done with a rally, then people say, well, what are you going to do now? So, well, I guess we have another rally. So it's just rally after rally after rally. We held a lot of rallies, but and a lot of people were afraid to come to them. People might believe like you, but they're afraid because they see all these protesters there, maybe at a previous rally or on TV or something like that, I mean, so people would be afraid to attend a rally thinking that they're going to be crazy person going to attack them or something. So good people would be afraid to come to our rallies. And so at that time, around 2000, or about maybe a little bit before, we started focusing on building what you see here. And we built, first we built our office down there, and we built this church here. And the church is not part of the Klan. The church is totally separate. And I always got to emphasize that, because sometimes people think, well, that's a Klan church, and that's not true. The church is totally separate. I'm the pastor of the church, national director of the Knights Party, but they're not the same. They have totally different mailing list and finances and everything. And so they're not the same. Half the people, they're not members of the Knights. They come to church, but they're not members of the Knights. And and Caleb, my grandson, we probably ought to kick him out. I'm just joking. Just joking. Anyway, so we started building the structure, and then of course our building over here, Research Development Center, which is being built, and so that's where we are. So, but we still, back for years we've been talking about white genocide, and people. But now that people started to think maybe there's something is to it, people started to see there is some type of hatred towards white people. It's becoming. You hear it on Newsmax and Fox News some. This thing. Oh, but the thing is, let me show you here. This is why I brought this stuff along, is to show you. Here is. This is a magazine from Time Magazine. Okay, I'm sure you're familiar with Time Magazine. This is from 1990, and so 1990, Time Magazine. Now that is 25 years ago, 35 years ago. Time Magazine has a main story. What will the U.S. be like when whites are no longer the majority? And we're finding out now, aren't we? America's changing colors. And then the story here, into the, if I find the right page for it, I should have marked, but I guess I don't. Maybe I do. Maybe this is it. Oh yeah, okay. Beyond the melting pot, right here. Beyond the melting pot. In the 21st century, that's where we're at now, and that's not very far off, racial and ethnic groups in the U.S. will outnumber whites for the first time. The browning of America will alter everything in society, from politics and education to industry, values, and culture. Now here's another question. If we're all the same, why is anything going to change? They say the browning of America will alter everything. If we're all the same, then nothing should change. But it's going to alter everything from society, from politics, education, industry, values, and it has. It has. Look at our culture today. Look what's going on in Minneapolis with the Somalis going up there, and other places. Look at Dearborn, Michigan, with the which at one time from Detroit was a thriving white community. Now it's been taken over by Muslims. They got a Muslim. In fact, the Muslim mayor told some Christian pastor here about 2 months ago that you're not welcome in our city, and so it is changing. This invasion in our country is changing everything that we love and hold dear, and so we've been telling people about that. But who pays attention to us? We're extremists. But here, let me show you, because this is some stuff I brought. These are some headlines from various publications. This is from our Torch publication. U.S.-Mexican border out of control. That was in 1985. We wrote that as a headline. That's 40 years ago. We were telling our border was out of control 40 years ago. And so Donald Trump came by and fixed it, but we've been warning about it for years. Here's another one. It's called Invasion, America Under Siege. This was in in the 80s, 45 years ago. Here's another one from our publication, Torch. It said, U.S. moves towards a race war. That was in 1981. That's 44 years ago. We've been telling people this, but they're not listening. Here's one from a friend of mine, Dr. Edward Fields, and this is from the 1990s. Immigration invasion divides America. We see that happening. I mean, if people don't see it, then they're not paying attention to the news, or they're blind, or something. There's something wrong with them if they can't see this invasion changing everything that we love and hold dear. Here's one from 1983 from the White Patriot called "U.S. Cities Face Open Race War." We see that right in Minneapolis. We see it right now. Now, there's a lot of crazy white people. It's not always non-whites. There's a lot of crazy people that have been victims of the Frankfurt School. There's a whole other story. Let me finish here, and I'll tell you about the Frankfurt School. This is from 1979. Alien invasion threatens America. This is from a group called the New Order. Alien invasion threatens America. Here's one, Seal the Border. This is 1984, 41 years ago, from a publication called Defiance. Here's one, the Counselor publication right here. I got the headline. I could have brought the newspapers actually over here, but I didn't. This is one, the U.S. facing the establishment of Black Republic. Let's see. I guess that's it. So these things have been going on. Now, in here, a while back, there's a fellow came here named Josh White. I think his name was it Caleb? Josh White? And he's got his, he's a YouTuber. He put a deal on TV. And I think it was him anyway. And they kind of mocked, because I moved from from Tucson out to Arkansas here, because my wife and all saw what going to happen with the open borders and the Mexicans and so forth. That was back in 1972. We could just see. Anyway, he kind of mocked me by saying Rob thought he was like a prophet because he could foretell the future about what's going to happen. And that's why he moved. Well, no, it's not that. You don't have to be a prophet. You just have to have your eyes open, And so his publication going back 40-some years ago, warning people that we're under invasion that's going to change America's culture, everything we love and hold dear in America. Because America was, you may not know this, but you're going to know it now because I'm going to tell you. The very first immigration law passed by our U.S. Congress in March in 1789, March 27, 1789, I believe it was. The very first immigration law says only white people can move to America. If you were white, you couldn't come to this country. This idea that America is built on a multicultural, multiracial, it's a myth, and there's no truth to it. The very first immigration law, and if that law, in some form, lasted until 1965. In 1965, we passed a new immigration law signed by Lyndon Johnson in August of 1965 in the shadow of the Statue of Liberty, and totally changed our immigration policy. And so today, all the top 10 countries, I think it's actually top 15 countries, maybe even more than that, but definitely the top 10 countries where all our immigrants come from are from non-white countries. And so we're wondering why our politics are changing, we're wondering why our society is changing, we're wondering why our communities are changing, why our churches are changing, we wonder why all this is going on. It's because we have the Bible says, while men slept, enemy came in among them. And we have been sleeping. We have been sleeping. Here is, this is not talking about me now. Now I know I'm switching from talking about me to just talking about propaganda, in a good sense propaganda, but as long as I am going to continue. This is Crossing the Flag. Crossing the Flag is put out by Joel O.K. Smith. You ever heard of Joel O.K. Smith? Have you heard of the Passion Play in Eureka Springs? Have you heard of the Christ of the Ozarks Eureka Springs? Joel K. Smith is the one that built those. He's the founder. He's the one that built the Passion Play and built the Christ of the Ozarks. It's not just myth. You go up there, and it's well known and established. He's the one that built that. All right. He was an early supporter of my ministry. In 1958, he gives an article here. In 1958, in Dallas Morning newspaper, they printed a statement signed by 330 ministers, preachers, 330 ministers, preachers in Dallas and Fort Worth area, saying that they oppose the intermixing of white and black children in our public schools. 330 ministers in Dallas and Fort Worth. I dare say you could not find 330 ministers in Dallas and Fort Worth who do that today. You could not find 330 ministers in the whole state of Texas who would do that today. And I'll be willing to bet you could not find 330 ministers in the whole United States who would be willing to sign that statement today. That shows what has changed. What has changed, what I call that? Because what will the U.S. be like when whites are no longer the majority? Because everything's going to change. It's going to alter everything in our society, politics, religion, and so on. So I was putting out this information, and so as a result, there were people who liked it, embraced it, and other people who did not, and that's okay. And we were making headlines here in the country. Our city, Harrison, didn't appreciate it because a lot of attention was brought to Harrison. And I'm looking for the front page of this thing here. I don't want to get it. I don't want to lose it. Yeah, I guess I'll just stay here, keep it safe for now. Anyway, so there's a lot of attention brought to Harrison as a result of our being here. And so we've been very active in doing that, in putting out information. A lot of people moved into the area, not because of us, but they're escaping California. They're escaping major cities. They're escaping the East Coast. In fact, in 2010, Time magazine ran another article called The White Anxiety Crisis, and it said by the year 2042, white people will be a minority in this country, but that most of those minorities are going to be in the East Coast and West Coast. And the heartland will be still majority white. And we see that's happening. So that's why we got our church here. That's why we're establishing what we call the Christian Research Development Center. We have in there what I call a Januseum. Janus is, I made that word up. I didn't know it. But I was trying to think, I didn't like the word museum. And so I'm trying to think of some word that, and I stumbled across Janus. Janus was a Greek goddess of gates and doors. And according to the Greek god, the god could see things coming and things behind at the same time. So it's a two-faced, it was a two-faced god, could see things. And I thought, well, that's kind of what we are. We want to look at the past, but we want to look forward too. So we created this Januseum or museum where we're archiving all kinds of literature and publications of various groups over the years. I've got all kinds of stuff from a whole bunch. Caleb helped me sort these here back this past summer. All kinds of publications going way back into the 60s and 70s. And so we have that stuff, our archives over there. And then we're also put over there artifacts from various white nationalist leaders, people like George Lincoln Rockwell, his printing press he had, Willis Carto. You probably never heard of Willis Carto, but is my book over there? I guess I'd bring it here. Willis Carto here was an interesting character because he never stood into the limelight. He always stayed back in the shadows. But he was basically, he was very successful in what he's doing. Anyway, Willis Carto, according to his peer George Michael, is a professor at the University of Virginia. If I could read the right quote here, Willis Carto is arguably the most important radical conservative in post-war America. Best known as the founder of the infamous Liberty Lobby, he has shaped the far right's position on such issues as immigration, globalism, multiculturalism, and the conflict in the Middle East. This guy was extremely important in influencing the white nationalist movement, but he never didn't take. He did some public speaking, but for the most part, he was helped. He aided. He published a publication called Spotlight, which today is called the American Free Press, and so he. The reason I bring him up because he autographed a copy to me, but then when he passed away in 2016, his wife, who we keep in contact with continually even to this day, asked me to do his funeral in Arlington National Cemetery. And so all this attention to my life and my activities has made certain people in our Harrison government nervous because they think we're going to destroy the image of Harrison. Nobody want to move here. But if people keep moving here, and some of these people that move here, after like our mayor, I've been in this town longer than he has, and yet he tells me I'm not welcome. If he didn't like Harrison, why did he move here? Why did some of the other people on the Diversity Council move here if they didn't like what we're saying? And so, but that's where they're at. And so the thing is, so our voice, we try to elevate our voice as much as possible. We try to utilize the internet and programming as much as possible. We're not funded by Donald Trump or any rich cartels, just by hardworking men and women who love America, love our heritage, love our culture, love our history, love everything about our people, and so we're supported by them. And so from the time I was a baby, and even before that, with my mother and my dad and my wife had the same background. Like I said, that she went to that school where I met her at because she had the same background. So we were a perfect fit because of that. And so we've been just on this campaign of what I call white Christian revival for 60-some years or longer. And so there's not been twists and turns. I mean, I've never lost focus. I've always been moving forward, even at times when we were broke and destitute, which was many times in years gone by. I remember not having a car, and some guy found one in the junkyard, out of the field, out in Arkansas. I think it was, get an old car, you don't want it anymore, you stick it on your field. Well, he found an old car out of the field. He think, I think it'll make it run for you. And I drove it for about a year, and then it broke down on the hillside up there in Newton County. And I told my wife, I said, well, that's the end of this car. I forget what went wrong with it, but it's serious. So I hiked back to the post office where some old guys, because this years ago, all the old Ozark people, Missouri people, they're all passed on. It's a whole new generation. They're not the old Ozark hillbillies, so to speak. They're all gone, except for this guy over there. And I walked back there, and there's some guys around there, this pot-belly stove at the old little country post office. I said, anybody wants to buy my car? It broke down. I think somebody gave me $25 for it or something like that, But we drove for a while, and whenever we drove uphill, we had to open our windows because exhaust coming up into our face, so we had to open the windows so we didn't get gas. We didn't become a Holocaust victim. Or when it came to a traffic light, I had to be careful it didn't stall, because if it stalled, I had to lift up the hood and do something. I don't know what it was, but so we had a lot of those issues, and we faced, but we never lost focus. My wife never lost focus. Never one time in all these years did my wife say, Tom, why don't you quit and find something else to do? Not one time. And she was always there because she believed in the same goals that we believe, which is simply we believe in the existence of our people and a future for white children. Why is that so bad? Why is that a bad thing? We want to preserve our heritage. We want to preserve a culture. We want to preserve who we are, the identity. Why is that considered a bad thing? Why do we have to want to embrace this sodomite America that's being dumped on us? Because, in the Bible, we're told that the two last things, he said, that you're going to see at the last day, at the end time, he says, as it was in the days, you're probably familiar with the Bible, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be the coming of the Son of Man. And the second thing he said, as it was in the days of Lot, so shall it be at the coming of the Son. These are two things to look for at the end time. It will be as it was in the days of Noah, which was race mixing, and it was in the days of Lot, which was sodomy. Those are two things to watch for at the end time. And those are two things that have been dumped upon America and Western civilization in recent years. And out of that, there's some people said, no, you're not going to trans my children. You're not going to turn them into sodomites. You're not going to marry them off to some Negro. You're not going to do that. And because there's some people who resist, then the fake news, the Lugan press, lies about it, say they're haters, they're bigots, they're monsters, they want to kill people, they hang Negroes, well, and they just hate everybody. They're full of hate. And so I don't see it that way. You know, in my life, I don't think expressed the way. I tell people, I said, in my 60 years of ministry, okay, in the hundreds and hundreds of interviews I've done, in the newspaper articles I've been written about, in speeches I've given, in articles I've written, you cannot find one single time where I have ever said, I hate non-whites. It does not exist. Because I don't hate non-whites. I don't hate somebody because he's black or Asian. I don't hate them, but still, they're not our people. I've traveled I've traveled throughout the country, and I've been in every state of the union except Hawaii, and I've never been mistreated by a black person in the airport or traveled to hotels. I've never been mistreated. I have no personal reason why I would hate a non-white. But that doesn't mean they're still a different people. They're different than we are, and so you know we had to be mature enough to recognize that. When I was a youngster growing in Detroit, my dad sold insurance, and he had what was called a debit route. And a debit route back then was you traveled around, you collect your insurance premium from the customer, you know, and back then, insurance probably 35 cents a week or something, you know. And so my dad would go, oh, you owe 70 cents. And I go, okay, here's 70 cents. Thank you. I'll see you next week or whatever. I don't know. I was just a child. But in the summertime, when I wasn't in school, sometime my dad would say, Tom, you want to go with me? And I said, yeah, sure. But, you know, he would stop at a restaurant. Didn't have McDonald's back then. We'd stop at a restaurant and get something to eat, get a hamburger. Travis Hamburger is really good in Detroit. And get a cherry pie or something like that, and get a chocolate shake, which is a lot different than the chocolate shakes they sell today. And so, yeah, I wanted to drive up with my dad. But a large portion of his debit route was in the black neighborhoods. Now, back then, we didn't call them black neighborhoods. We called them the colored part of town. And a large portion was in the colored part of town. But never once did my mother say, his name was Bob, never once did she say, Bob, don't take Tommy, okay, because you're going into black neighborhood in colored town. It's too dangerous. Bob, you better get another job. Bob, do you have your gun with you? You know, never once did she say, get another job, make sure you carry your gun, don't take Tommy, it's too dangerous. Never once, because the black colored sections of Detroit were safe neighborhoods. They were safe back then because they were under the rule of law. You know, and 85% of the black families had a father at home. It's not today. That's not that way. We did not do those people any favors by pulling away black or white rule of law from their neighborhoods. We have not done them any favors, and those communities become chaos today. That's why when you travel through Kansas City and St. Louis and Philadelphia and Detroit and Chicago and Memphis and Nashville and Pittsburgh and Chattanooga and Atlanta, Pittsburgh, and we travel those cities, you don't get off at the wrong exit. Everybody knows, don't get off at the wrong exit. You know that. You don't have to be a white nationalist to know that. There's certain exits you just don't want to get off at because they're too dangerous. And yet people say, well, I'm not a racist. I'm not a racist, because they don't know what a racist is. I've seen people come to Harrison here who doing YouTube and so forth. They interview people in town and say, oh, we're not a racist community. Blacks can come in this town and they're fine. We don't care. Well, you know, we're not Klan. We're not racist. Well, they don't know what a racist is. They think racist hates black people, that we want to do them harm. You know, I've been in restaurants with skinheads. You know, who's supposed to be like the ultimate white racist. I've been in restaurants with skinheads where you had a non-white waiter or waitress, and I've never once seen them fail. These skinheads with tattoos who are supposed to hate everybody who's white, I've never once seen them fail to reach in a pocket, pull out a tip, and leave a tip on the table. Because that's our culture. That's how we're raised. We feel. In fact, I believe, you may have seen these statistics yourselves, but I believe that I've read that black people themselves say they'd rather have black waitresses would rather deal with the white clients in a restaurant than black clients because the whites tip better than the blacks. You know, I'm sure you've seen that. I don't. You've seen that, have you, Chester? The whites tip better. It's our culture. We are so to say we're racist. We're not hating white people. We just want to keep what's ours. We think there's something precious about our history, some precious about our culture, some precious about who we are, our heritage, some precious about our faith. We want to keep that. But those words are filtered out when it gets to the national media. They just want, oh, you hate black people. You don't believe black people can go to heaven. I did an interview with Bryce Crawford here, and he asked me that question. You think blacks? And I didn't answer adequately. I know I didn't. I wish I would have answered it better. And he said, do you think black people can go to heaven? You know, and I don't know how he said I did answer it good. I can't remember how I answered it. But the thing is that a lot of people think if you don't believe black people go to heaven, then you must think they go to hell. Well, I don't think black people go to hell. Well, why God's not going to send somebody to hell just because he's black. He created the black race. He created the white race. He said, and when he said it's all good, you know, but it's obviously good in its own order. And so he said, do you think blacks can be saved? And I said, well, I don't know. The Bible doesn't really say, but I will say they can be blessed. A black person who follows the commandments of the Lord can be blessed. You know, but that wasn't good enough for him, was it, Chester? He said no, it wasn't good enough for him. But I'm thinking back now, what better than being blessed by the Lord? So a black man, he can be blessed, but that doesn't mean he's white. That doesn't mean he can marry my daughter or marry my children. It doesn't mean because we're different people, you know. And so we have the Harrison City Council. They're upset, and because a guy put out a video here called Arkansas. Have you seen that? Arkansas. You know, and well, Tom Robb is shaping the story of Harrison. And I don't know if I am or not. Here's what I am. I did a rally. I spoke at a rally in Atlanta, Georgia years ago. And I used to go, other groups would hold a rally or so, and sometimes they invite me to speak because I'm a fairly good speaker. And they'll invite me to speak. And so I would go, and I stopped doing that after a while, but at this rally I went. And some guy got up, and some Klan guy, he had a robe on, and he got up there, stood behind the podium and said, I'm the biggest, baddest Klansman in all Georgia, you know. I'm thinking to myself, well, whoopee for you, you know. You know. And my attitude, and I actually said this in my speech, probably made him mad. I said, I'm not big, I'm not tough. I'm just a man who loves his children. That's all I am. And I love my grandchildren. I'm not a tough guy. I'm not a scrapper, you know. I'm just a Tom Robb, and I got a voice, and I have the ability to speak, and I put the thoughts together. And I'm just somebody who loves his kids and loves his grandkids. That's all I am, you know. But that's not good enough. That's not good enough. For the element that had risen in power, the Bible said spiritual wickedness in high places. The spiritual wickedness that had risen over our nation today doesn't want you to love your people. They want you to be sodomites. They want you to take your boys and turn them into girls. They want to take your girls and turn them into boys. They want to intermarry. They want anything they can do to destroy our people, destroy our heritage. And if you're not a willing accomplice for the destruction of our people, then you're a hater and a bigot and a monster and an evil person. You're a demon. You're a Satan. You're going to hell. And so, and I'm rattling on here forever. So, any thoughts?
You did mention the Klansmen who, I guess, didn't see eye to eye with what you might have said. Were there any other times when you were the national director, from the start till today, where you had Klan members break away from the Klan itself, or just had disagreements along with that?
Oh, I have a disagreement with my wife. You know, so yeah, there's disagreements all the time. But there was only one time back in the 30s where, and the media made it like a big deal, you know, but it really wasn't. Some fellow guy in Chicago named Ed Novak. He broke off and started called the Federation of Clans, and he maybe a dozen members. But he said like he split the Klan in half, But they don't exist anymore. I'm still here, shooting my mouth off, and So people come. People. When people join the Klan, they're not necessarily going to be there forever. I look over the years. I can maybe not see it all the time, but I see people and I say, "Oh, you're a lifer." And then some people I think, well, 3 to 5 years you'll be gone. And because there's an element of people who join the Klan because of the excitement. They want to build. I think in this, I don't know if this is a fact, but I'm thinking they want to take their Klan card to show their friends, If they go to bars, they want to go to the bars. Look, that don't impress me. But I don't even drink, and don't go to bars certainly. And although somebody told me, his dad here and I about 20 years ago, we went to bought a car. I bought a car at Car-Mart, and and Car-Mart, they finance their own cars, And a lady in the back room who does the financing came around and said, "Mr. Robb, I haven't seen you in several years." I said, "Oh, really? Yeah. Last time I saw you was at a biker party there at Bellefonte." And I said, "I don't go to biker parties." "Oh, yeah, you were there." I didn't argue with her, but I don't go to biker parties, And I've had stuff like that. I had somebody tell a friend of mine, say, "Oh, yeah, we know the Robb family. I play poker with him every Friday night. I play poker with Tom Robb." And I don't care if someone wants to play poker. I'm just telling you my life. I've never played poker one time in my life. I have no idea how to play poker. The only thing I know about poker is this. You got to know when to hold them, got to know when to fold them, got to know when to walk away, and got to know when to run. That's the only thing I know about poker. And but yeah, people come up with these stories sometimes, Somebody in the one interview, a guy was out this past summer, somebody told him that my daughter married, has a biracial child. It's not true, so rumors will always be there, I guess you just, they tell lies about Christians. The Romans were saying Christians were over. I think Nero said that Christians were Rome burnt down or something. I don't know, but been lies told about Christians for centuries. So you're never going to stop those things. You just live a life, and be honest, and let you testify. I tell people the only people who it sounds like I'm bragging or being egotistical, and I'm not doing either one of those. But I think I can truthfully say the only people who don't like me are people who don't know me. People know me and know my family. In Harrison, I tell people when they come to Harrison, don't make the assumption that the people you talk to don't like us. Make the assumption that people in Harrison like us. There are some who don't. But we've been in town a long time. My son's an attorney. In Harrison here, knows lots of people. We've been here since 50 years. My wife was a supervisor of a big warehouse in Harrison. So we've known a lot of people over the years. A lot of people know us by influence or whatever. And so I just make the assumption that people like us. Now the city council, that's a different deal, or the mayor. Here back a few years, when he put a billboard up, somebody went on the internet and put up a petition to have the billboard removed, and they made a big deal about it. Over 9,000 people in Harrison signed had the billboard removed, The point is, you looked at those names, they weren't from Harrison, they're from California and New York and Detroit, so, they're from other places. Anybody can go on the internet and sign a petition for whatever thing they want to support or oppose, So, those things happen. Those are the baggage. A lot of people think they believe the stories about us hanging black people every weekend and we'll run them out of town. And here's a story. This is kind of a funny story. My son, the one who owned Dixie Outfitters, years ago we had a Shoney's restaurant. You have a Shoney's? We had a Shoney's restaurant, and he was a waiter. This is kind of a funny story. So he's in there one Sunday morning waiting on tables. A little black bus comes in, about 8 or 10 blacks in it, little church bus. And they sit down there at a table to eat, and he's a waiter. So he goes there and said, what can I take for you? She says, well, we all like orange juice. He said, okay. So he wrote down 8 glasses of orange juice, an example. And he said, okay. And then he goes in the back and says, I need 8 glasses of orange juice. And the guy said, we're out. He said, really? He said, yeah. He said, we got 2 glasses, all we got left. And he said, what should I do? Just tell them we're out. He said, okay. So he said, I'm sorry, we're out of orange juice. And they're okay, they're fine with that. But unfortunately, about 5 minutes later, a husband and wife came in who were white. 2 of them. Remember, there's only 2 glasses of orange juice at the back. And they ordered orange juice. And their waiter brought about 2 glasses of orange juice. Now these blacks are upset. And I can understand. I can't condemn them for that. I'll feel a bit irate. Somebody told me they didn't have it, and then they had it, I want Dr. Pepper. Oh, I want Dr. Pepper. We only have Coke. Whatever. So they were upset about it. I don't think they made a scene, but they made some complaint to the manager. And then they went back home. Then a letter came from their church they made a letter to corporate offices of Shoney's. They started issuing complaints. Now they're making a deal out of it, okay? Here's the deal. My son is the only bona fide Klansman, although people around town knew his politics, but these blacks didn't know that. He's the only bona fide racist. So they complained to corporate headquarters of Shoney's. They said the only person who treated them decently was their waiter. And it's the only one who was a bona fide racist, So, yeah. So, anyway, any other questions?
Yeah, I've probably got 2 more. What changes have you noticed, besides the one you bring about with the internet for the Klan? What other changes? I believe you, instead of taking the Imperial Wizard title, you stuck with National Director.
Yeah, David Duke actually started that.
He did that? Okay.
Yeah, he did that, and I think it's probably wise because, you want to, in any type of marketing, I use the word propaganda sometimes, but propaganda has a negative image, even though the original guy, I forget his name now, he actually wrote a book called Propaganda, and it was referring to, when he wrote a book about propaganda, he referring to marketing fashion designs for women, and they had the right propaganda for them to buy. It was a good word, but it became now demonized. So sometimes but it's just marketing. And so in marketing, you want to appeal to the broadest base of people. You don't want divisions there's certain, we have enough divisions to say we're for white people. That's enough to scare some people, but, so we've tried to use things that have more marketing appeal to people. Now, sometimes we're mocked for that, but why? Every business does that. Now if you're Cracker Barrel, don't try to do that. Because if you try to change your market appeal and get rid of Uncle Herschel and the display, you're going to get in trouble, So you always want a good marketing appeal. Nothing wrong with that. It's just good business.
Absolutely. And then, were there any, I know you have talked a little bit about rumors being spread. Was there anything that you wanted to clarify? Because you know how the specters can change things and biases with journalists.
Well, without knowing what the latest rumor is, I don't know. I don't know, but the thing is, I don't hate black people. I think black people can be blessed by God. I'd rather have a black person living and following the commandments of the Lord than have them being a cannibal. It was old voodoo rituals. So I'd rather be Christian in that way. But, and they can be blessed, but there is a difference. And the difference lies, the way I see it, lies in the fact that I believe, this is not Klan belief, this is my belief, okay? In Klan, the only requirements we have to be a member of the Klan is you be a professing Christian. Not you be Catholic or Mormon or Methodist or Lutheran or Baptist. You're professing. We're not going to give religious tests, okay? Just like our founding fathers understood that. They didn't want to. That's why that's deal about no religious tests, because they didn't want the fighting that was going on in Europe between the Protestants and the Catholics. They didn't want to import that into the United States, so it's no religious tests. But my personal beliefs now is that I believe that the white race are the descendants of the covenant descendants of ancient Israel. God made a covenant with Abraham in the 17th chapter of Genesis, and he said that he's going to bless them, and they're going to become a multitude of nations in the earth. You probably read that. There's going to be a multitude of nations in the earth. And he said you can possess the gates of your enemies. He said any weapon that formed against you will not prosper, and numerous other things. Okay, and I believe those people descended from Abraham, then Isaac and Jacob. Jacob, then the name was changed to Israel. So sometimes people refer to him as Jacob Israel. He had 12 sons, became the 12 tribes of Israel. They lived there in Palestine. They became a nation. And then after the death of Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, not death of Rehoboam, death of Solomon, Rehoboam became the king of Judah. Okay? And when he did that, the people, because there were 12 tribes, if you know your Bible history and you're keeping up with me, there are 12 tribes. 10 of those tribes came to King Solomon or Rehoboam and said, taxes too high, your taxes are death, we can't buy Twinkies, and my kids are starving and so forth. And you need to lower taxes. And then Rehoboam says, then Rehoboam goes to the young advisors. They go to the old advisors. They say, what should I do? And the old advisors said, lower taxes, And the young advisor said, stick it to them. You're the king, you do what you want. So he told them, he said, I'm not going to lower taxes. So then the 10 tribes rebelled. And then you had two nations, from that. You had Israel, which were 10 tribes. You had Judah became the tribe, was made up of a tribe of Judah and tribe of Benjamin and part of the tribe of Levi. And so now you have two separate nations, and they existed. Jeremiah was a prophet to Judah. Isaiah was a prophet to Israel. And now they existed simultaneously, two different nations now for several hundred years. And they have a whole new history. And then Israel, they both rebelled against the law of the Lord. God tells Israel, he said, I'm going to punish you. And they became under 4 different invasions by Assyria. Millions, not just a few thousand, millions of the Israelites were deported or exported out of their homeland. And north of Israel, massive amount of them went through the Caucasus Pass, the Dario Pass, and the Caucasus Mountains. Okay, and then then into Europe. A large number also went east and went through the where Istanbul is at, pass of I can't think of it now. Varsovia is just right past, and then a fewer number, but still many, went through the Mediterranean, went to Ireland, and then up into Scotland. That's why when the Scottish Declaration of Independence was signed in 1320, they list their genealogy as coming from Israel. A lot of people don't know that. So people say, where's the proof that the white race is Israel? Well, there's one. The Scottish Declaration of Independence says they came from Israel, signed in 1320. Another one is, so they populated because God says Abraham become a multitude of nations. This little Palestine, that's not a multitude. That's one little tiny nation. But Israel said, God tells Abraham, become a multitude of nations. And they became the nations of Europe. And so you have Scotland, and Ireland. Ireland actually means the land of the Hebrews. And then you had England, and we had the Britannic Isles. Britain comes from 2 Hebrew words meaning covenant people, And so you've got other things here. So you've got these people who are blessed by God, enormously blessed by God, And so there's never been, the way I view it, there's never been a moment, even a twinkling of a moment in history when God was not dealing with his people, whether it be Adam, through the law, to the prophets, to poets, to songwriters. God always dealt with Adam, his descendants, and to Eber, to Abraham, Isaac, to the nation of Israel, and to all the nations that filled up Europe. We built cathedrals thousands of years ago when the blacks in Africa still can't build but a mud hut to last past the next rainy season. And so you got enormous blessings that came upon upon Israel. God, it says in Psalms, he said he dealt with Israel as he dealt with no other nation. And so when you say that, people, well, that's racist. Well, there's more evidence. There's more evidence to show that the white race are descendants of Israel than to show that the Jews are. There's no evidence for that, except they got the name, but there's no evidence. There's no history. You know, the Bible said God dwells within the praises of his people. When was the last time you go to a Jewish synagogue and see them praising Jesus? They don't do that at a Jewish synagogue. They don't believe in Jesus. You know, so, God has always dwelt among our people and blessed them. And so, and I don't know what your question was and why I went off that route. But, I do believe that our race, our people, are the children of that wonderful covenant that God gave Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And we have a whole lot of people, so we don't believe in that covenant. But what happened to Esau when he rejected the covenant? Remember Jacob there, and he picks some beans stew or antelope or whatever they're fixing there, and Esau is hungry, and Jacob said, "Oh, sell me your birthright." And Esau sold his birthright, and the Bible said that he was accursed for it. So, we have a wonderful birthright. You don't throw away a birthright. When some man who receives or a woman receives an inheritance from their mom and dad, they build a wonderful business, and they give it to the son. Upon their death, give it to their son and give it to their daughter. What do we think of somebody who blows away their birthright? We don't think very highly of them. You say, your dad gave you a wonderful multi-million-dollar business. Within a year and a half, you destroyed it. Or you went through it. You went through it. You destroyed it. So. God gave us a wonderful covenant, a wonderful birthright, and I think we should embrace it and love it.